Today we'll be talking about reflexive verbs. In French we call them les verbes reflechis. What is a reflexive verb? Well, a reflexive verb is a verb in which the subject is performing the action of the verb to him or to herself. I have an example here. Se laver, to wash oneself. You'll notice that se, S-E, that is called your reflexive pronoun. That's what makes this verb reflexive. The example says, je me lave, I'm washing myself. The act of washing is happening to the subject. It's happening to you. So that makes it reflexive. As opposed to our second example, lave. There's no se, so that means this is not a reflexive verb. Lave by itself means to wash. Je lave mon chien, I'm washing my dog. Because the act of washing is happening to the dog and not to the subject of the sentence, lave cannot be a reflexive verb. What is a reflexive pronoun? Well, I have this nice chart here that gives you the subject pronoun as well as the corresponding reflexive pronoun. With je, your corresponding reflexive pronoun will be me. You'll use M apostrophe if your verb begins with a vowel. To corresponds with te. Again, if your verb begins with a vowel, use T apostrophe. Il singular, you would use se. If the verb begins with a vowel, again, you would use S apostrophe. You can't have two vowels next to each other in these cases. Nous and vous seem kind of redundant. However, the first nous refers to the subject pronoun, and the second refers to the corresponding reflexive pronoun. The plural il forms, your reflexive pronoun would be se. And again, if the verb begins with a vowel, use S apostrophe. Now this may make more sense once you see some full-blown examples coming up. How to conjugate reflexive verbs? Well, here are some steps for conjugating reflexive verbs. The very first thing you're going to do, as always, is to write the subject. Then you're going to write the corresponding reflexive pronoun, your me, te, se, nous, vous, or se. The next thing you'll do is drop the ending. Notice this applies only if your reflexive verb is regular. So if it is a regular reflexive verb, you're going to drop the ER, the IR, or the RE, and then step 4, add the appropriate ending. If your verb is irregular, unfortunately, those are the ones that you will simply have to memorize. Here is an example of a verb, a reflexive verb that is fully conjugated. And we've got je me lave. Notice with the infinitive here, se laver, I already have step 1 is in black. That's your je, tu, il, nous, vous, and your plural il. Step 2 was to write the reflexive pronoun that corresponds. So everything in purple, me, te, se, nous, vous, and se. Those are all your reflexive pronouns. Step 2. Step 3 said we had to look at the reflexive infinitive, which is lave, and then we're going to drop the ER, and so we're left with the stem, LAV. In red for each of the conjugations, you'll see the stem. And then in green, you'll notice the endings for regular ER verbs, which is E, ES, E, ONS, EZ, ENT. Those are all 4 steps that I've color-coded for you. I've also given you the meaning of some of these in case you haven't remembered them. So, je me lave, I wash myself. I am washing myself. I do wash myself. Tu te laves, you wash yourself. You are washing yourself. You do wash yourself. So here's a nice little example here of how to conjugate a reflexive verb. There are some irregular reflexive verbs, as I alluded to earlier in the presentation. On your vocabulary list, we'll talk about some of those. I have 4 of them listed here for you. We have s'endormir. Notice it has dormir inside of it, so it has to deal with going to sleep, right? You would be correct. S'endormir is to go to sleep. Se mettre en colère. This is one of those weird ones that does not have a word for word translation. It means to get or to become angry. Se lever, to get up. Se sécher, to dry oneself. So those are examples of irregular reflexive verbs. These 4 verbs here will not follow all of the rules that we have for conjugating. Why? Because they're irregular. You cannot drop the IR. You cannot drop the RE. Those will not work. Those rules do not apply for those. However, se lever and se sécher, they are only slightly irregular, and the reason why they're on this list is not because their endings are different from normal ER verbs. They're on this list because of their accent marks. Their accent marks. And notice in the infinitive for se lever, there's not even an accent there. However, in the conjugations, there are accents. So you still have the E, ES, ONS, EZ, ENT endings for se lever and se sécher, but they're irregular because of their accents. I fully conjugated s'endormir and se mettre en colère for you. Notice, I told you could not simply drop the IR and add the IS, ISIT, ISSONS, ISSEZ, ISSENT ending. That does not work for s'endormir. Notice, you've got an SST ending, ONSEZENT. And if you look, your left side of the chart is conjugated differently than the right side. The left side does not have an M. Okay, after the R, there's no M. However, on the right side of the chart, you have an M here. Okay, there's another M. There's another M. So these you simply have to memorize. Same thing with se mettre en colère. You cannot drop the RE and just add the SS nothing, ONSEZENT. That does not work. Why? If you look on the left side of your chart here, there's only one T. One T. As opposed to the right side of the chart, you have the double T. Okay? Nothing changed in terms of writing your m, t, s, nu, vu, and your s again. Those steps did not change. It's simply the conjugation for the reflexive infinitive itself. That part is what makes it irregular. Okay, se lever and se sécher. Again, you still have the E, ES, ONS, EZ, ENT endings. However, I have color-coded the accents for you. Notice you have an accent grave on the boot. They're all pronounced the same. Lève. Same thing with se sécher. There's an accent grave only in the boot, and it's pronounced sèche. With se sécher, the nu and the vu actually have an accent as well. They're going in the opposite direction though. It's accent aigu. The boot has accent grave, and the nu vu has accent aigu. The same is not true for se lever. The only accents in se lever occur in the boot. Pardon my drawing of my boot. Alle and the reflexive. When you want to discuss when you're going to do something, you have to use alle, of course. That means to go. So here's the structure that I've created to help you form your sentences correctly for using alle and reflexive verbs. The first thing you're going to do is write your subject pronoun. And in this example at the bottom, I've color-coded everything for you. So the subject pronouns are in yellow. We conjugate alle in red down here. Okay, ve, va, allons, allez, vont. Then we wrote our reflexive pronoun M apostrophe is used, again because amuser begins with a vowel. And then in purple, we have the reflexive infinitive. Notice I did not conjugate this reflexive infinitive. Why? It's because the verb aller is already conjugated. You can only conjugate that first verb. You cannot conjugate the second. It must remain in the infinitive. Now it's time for you to check your understanding. At this time, I would like for you to pause the presentation so that you can have more time to answer the questions appropriately. Remember, in order to get full points for your Cornell notes, you must complete the check your understanding. If you don't, the maximum points you will receive is a 90. Here are the answers to the checking your understanding. Mes soeurs et moi is the same thing as saying nous. N-O-U-S, nous. Okay, so we had to change this "s" to nous. Nous corresponds with nous. Where did we get préparons from? Well, préparer is a regular ER, so we dropped our ER. We were left with our stem, prépare, and then we simply added the ONS ending. For number 2, remember qui uses il. So because of that, if we look back earlier in the presentation, we'll notice that "s" corresponds with the EOL form. Therefore, there's no change. That stayed the same. Réveiller is a regular ER verb, so we crossed out the ER and we added an E because that's the ending that corresponds with il. S'ennuyer is a your verb. It has the same ER endings. However, in the boot, remember your Y changes to an I. Okay? Les étudiants is the same thing as saying il, plural. They, right? So the S apostrophe will stay the same. All we did was we took off our ER ending, added ENT, and we changed our Y to an I. And number 4, se mettre en colère was already conjugated for you earlier in the presentation. That was an irregular verb we just have to memorize. The same is true for s'endormir. That was already conjugated for you early in the presentation. Emily is the same thing as saying L. It means Emily. And that was simply a memorized form. At this time, you need to pause the presentation again to allow yourself enough time to do the check your understanding. Here are the answers in red. Number 1, mes parents se douchent. That should have been the correct conjugation for this verb here. It needed to end in ENT because mes parents is the same thing as il, plural, ILS, meaning they. So you had to cross the ER off and add your ENT. Je vais me relaxer. Remember, you cannot have "se" here. Because your subject is je, you have to change "se" to "me." Number 3, there was nothing wrong. Number 4, nous nous rasons. We simply crossed off our ER and added our ONS ending. And then with number 5, vous vous habillez. Remember, vous is the reflexive pronoun that corresponds with vous. If you have any questions, please write them down and bring them to class.